Welcome to Making Sense of the Madness. We got a great show lined up for you today. We're going to be talking about the Las Vegas shootings with Xander Arena. This is a topic of interest for myself and many others, and many unanswered questions to this day about Stephen Paddock and much more. You're not going to want to miss it. Buckle up and get ready to make sense of the madness. And we are back. We are now joined by Xander Arena. The website is vegastruth.org. That's vegastruth.org. So before we even get into the event, the official narrative, the anomalies, what you believe happened, first of all, who are you? What's your background in this? And what piqued your interest to kind of do deep research on this subject in particular?
Big question. Good morning, Jason and audience. So I'm an independent researcher. I'm a guy who in 2001 lived in Arizona and caught the local news coverage of William Cooper being attempted to be detained and killed. And I had this gut-wrenching reaction. It was a sickening feeling inside where I almost threw up in my living room because I had read his book, Behold a Pale Horse. And I realized in that moment in time that everything we had seen in 2001 and the months preceding were exactly what he had been alluding to in that book. So, flash forward many years. That early realization led to a life where I would question the narrative and look at physical evidence as the keystone for my understanding of things. And in 2006, I caught your video, Loose Change, actually at a Mensa watch party. It was a local Mensa group, and the Mensans wanted to watch Loose Change. And I was like, yeah, man. So I go. And I was really compelled by it. I mean, how could you not be, right? How could you not be? And at that point in time, it was like, okay, clearly, this is a bad deal. And I got heavily involved in the 9/11 Truth movement behind the scenes at that time. And so for many years, I've volunteered with organizations like Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. And now I've helped with the International Center for 9/11 Justice, the Lawyers Committee for 9/11 Inquiry. So all these various groups. And when you dig into that, you realize that there was strange behavior out of the Department of Justice at the time. So we know about the high fivers that were apprehended in New Jersey crossing the bridge, the later revealed to be Mossad operatives. And we know that then he was a deputy attorney general, I believe, but Michael Chertoff had released them. So he was always kind of like an interesting character in that event.
And just
Um,
to kind of follow up on that, they had already rounded up people in that network prior, and then they actually rounded up more people outside of New York after. There were over 120 detainees in my follow-up film, Fabled Enemies. Both Ari Fleischer, who was the press secretary at the time, and Colin Powell not only were asked about that, but were confirmed. And eventually all of them were worked out of the country and back into Israel. The ones that you're referring to that were on the rooftop actually went on a talk show later on and talked about it.
yes.
And people can debate whether or not they were part of Mossad. They all had backgrounds in the IDF. It's Israel and explosive units. Just for everybody to know what their actual backgrounds were. When they went on that show, they said that their job was to document the event. And I would also put out there, it's probably 7 or 8 years ago now that the FBI finally put out some information due to FOIA requests from an individual that actually I was in contact after the fact. And instead of releasing the pictures that they took, they released photocopied scans, black and white scans that wouldn't reveal the details of those pictures and blotted out their faces, even though their identities had already been known. And literally in one of those photos, despite the fact you can't see it in color, someone's holding a lighter up to the burning World Trade Center building. Now, I want to ask my audience, what do you think is under those little pictures? The reason they want you to see it because they're all smiling about it before the second attack even happens. Food for thought. Sorry for the interruption. Please continue.
No, it's great background. I mean, and it's relevant because for us, clearly, then Chertoff was a person of interest. Now, I had spent a substantial fraction of my life in this world, right? So, married, children, a full-time career in clinical healthcare, working hard to do the basics, for a guy in his 30s, 40s, et cetera. Um, and the time I spent in the 9/11 truth really took from my family. That was an investment. And so when this Vegas thing happened, we had friends that were there, living here in Phoenix. Ton of people that we knew had gone up there for the event. And they came back and reported that what we had been told was not at all what had happened. They reflected on the fact that they had been shot at from different vectors. These were people with prior military. They weren't like freaked out by the panic of gunfire. Like they could determine that, oh, we're being shot from different directions. Clearly, then not just one loci of the shots. So I was a little curious. I didn't have a lot of time to look into it, but I was curious. And one of the first things that popped up on the internet was all of the flight radar stuff. Truth Tracker, a guy named Chris, he was one of the early people to really get into that. Shepard and Bellis had talked about it. I think he went on Alex Jones's show. And I was just, I always want to look at the original data and make my own determination. So I got my own flight radar account. I corroborated everything that they were seeing. I then started figuring, well, let me just try to get the original data. So I FOIA'd FAA. I've got a recorded phone call that I eventually made many years later with the FAA, in which they revealed I was the first filer for that FOIA information. But it took almost 4 years for them to release anything to me. But when we look at the anomalies of the radar patterns, the transponders went off on 3 helicopters behind the Mandalay Bay about 20 minutes before the shooting, which was completely crazy. And then, of course, there's the video capture of what appears to be muzzle flash between the airspace of the hotel. So there was just a lot going on there, and it was a big like whoa. Um, but Chertoff had been singled out as a possible accomplice, or there was this 4chan post that had surfaced to the internet.
And let's
Um,
let's let's take a moment because a lot of people may not know who Michael Chertoff was, is, etc. So for
okay,
those
yeah,
that don't know, Michael Chertoff at the time of 9/11 and his ability to say release these guys that were picked up, he was the deputy director of the FBI at the time. However, before Homeland Security existed, they had to figure out who was going to lead it. And Michael Chertoff ends up being the initial head of the Department of Homeland Security as well. He was also heavily invested in the main company that instituted the body scanners into airports that were instituted through the Department of Homeland Security. So now you're fast forwarding to Vegas, and Vegas is what, 2017?
17, yeah.
2017. So, by this time, I believe he's out of the Department of Homeland Security and he's back in the
Mhm.
private sector, correct?
Correct. He's got a group called Chertoff Group, but still aligned with these body scanner tech, machines and whatnot. And this 4chan post that hit the internet alleged that he had been working with Sheldon Adelson to do some sort of mass casualty event in Vegas in which they would profit with billions of dollars because their market share had dried up, right? Like they got all the airports, they wanted more contracts, more exposure, more whatever, and that was the motive. This was what the post alleged.
And for those, again, that don't know who Adelson he's no longer with us, but multi-billionaire. I believe he's the owner of MGM, right? Not Mandalay.
Uh, yeah, I don't know the answer to that,
I
Jason.
think I'm pretty confident to say he was the owner of the MGM. And for those that don't know, he was also the largest contributor initially in the 2016 run to Trump as far as private investors go.
That's correct. And his wife Miriam is just given, I think it's 100 million or whatnot to Trump this time
Yes,
around.
yes.
So
So
yeah, they're
she's
very
still around.
influential,
He's
powerful
not. They're
people.
still huge contributors and very influential people. Please continue.
Totally. So, having spent so much of my time on this 9/11 truth world, I'm like, well, maybe we can do a roundabout and maybe get some accountability or justice if this guy Chertoff is in fact event in this current mass casualty event in which there appears to be a lot of evidence. So I really sunk my teeth into it, and the more I bit, and the more I pulled on the threads, the more crazy the story got. And so I've recently done an interview on the channel Redacted, in which I kind of go over all of the details of that evidence, and so that's probably worthwhile for your audience to see if you're not aware of it. But there are so many discrepancies with the body in the room. That was one of the
Yeah.
things being a
Let's. You know
healthcare
what?
worker.
Let's take it for the audience again because it's been a long time.
Yeah.
For those that don't know what the official version is, let's start there, and then we can start because you've already mentioned kind of this anomalous behavior of helicopters. I know Shepard. I did Shade the Motion Picture with Shepard Ambellis. He was initially, me and him were going back and forth about what we thought and et cetera on all the videos. He sent me that before he went on Alex Jones. Again, not being able to read the radar, again, I didn't know exactly what to make of it, but I had seen a ton of anomalies compared to what they initially tell us that essentially a crazy person knocks out a window. And again, with my work with 9/11, I know that windows just don't knock out, especially at big hotels. I'm like, all right, well, this right there already, some weird stuff going on. I know they also don't open. And then you see all these people getting shot. They tell you it's a guy named Stephen Paddock. You look
Mhm.
into the guy even cursory, very bizarre behavior, obviously independently wealthy, and just fleshing out what the mainstream, although they didn't hit on it much, this guy didn't go there alone. Was a married guy, but his wife was overseas at the time in some I'm not sure if it was Vietnam, I forget, but it was
Philippines.
Philippines. That's it. So he's got all this money. He's got a Filipino wife out of the country. He checked into the hotel with either a prostitute or another woman. Later on, that prostitute comes forward, gives some interviews or whatever. He's got tannerite in his truck downstairs, like a lot. The place is littered with guns, okay? And it's very apparent he's a wealthy arms dealer. Now, immediately when I cut into this, I thought to myself, well, then, what's he doing there? Why Vegas? I believe it's Lords of War, where a ton of arms deals are taking place. Where? In Vegas. And it's kind of this hub for money laundering, black operations, etc. And that also got me a little wild. Then there were the stories that he was a big conspiracy guy, that he was talking about 9/11 to this prostitute. I don't know if you've ever seen those.
No, I haven't.
Oh yeah, talking about microchips and black ops, etc. All these things, and with that was presented kind of the receipts from the hotel over the past couple days between the two of them when they were getting food, etc. So all this behavior, and they're just telling me that he went wild, and even a lot of body cam footage everywhere inside the hotel and out. And as you stated, I mean, again, cursory examination of the evidence, the police radio evidence, the Tropicana footage. You have shooters all over the place.
All over the place. Um, and we know that Paddock was in that hotel, right? But we don't have an accurate timeline. The MGM never released the actual full. The Mandalay Bay didn't release, him going into the room and staying there, right? We just got these weird like snapshots. And Vegas, the one area where you're on camera doing everything. I mean, they should have had knowledge of exactly what happened. And then so when the LVMPD breached the room and their body cam reveal this guy laying on the ground with already advanced livor mortis, right? Like blood settling, in the back of his head. He's been dead clearly 4 to 6 hours at least, maybe as much as 8 hours. That was like, whoa. And then one of those cops took a photo of the body on the ground and it leaked to the wider internet immediately. And we know that because it was actually on an officer's cell phone on his own body cam as the event is going on. So you know it's like a live, like real time release. And
Mm-hmm.
in that picture, you see that this person who's dead on the floor up there has a detached earlobe, right? Like it's a irreconcilable, configuration of his ear. It's not Stephen Paddock. It cannot be Stephen Paddock. So then you start chewing on that, and you go into like the autopsy data and the other things. There's all these anomalies, like the height is wrong, the eye color is wrong, the scars are wrong, the time of death is missing. I mean, it's clearly not Stephen Paddock, which then says, okay, well, if Paddock was in the hotel and in that room, but this other person is not him, well, then clearly Mandalay Bay should have, video of this other person entering the room at whatever point in time and Paddock leaving. Like the whole crime is there to understand, or at least it was in 2017, 2018, right? And now it's so many years later, like it'd be easy for them to say, oh, all the tapes are gone now,
Well, when we talk about other shooters in particular, even
Yeah,
outside of the possibility of these helicopters, I mentioned the Tropicana, but there was another hotel that literally had its front windows blown out, the Bellagio. There were several videos of that. I mean, you could see it. So
yeah,
how does that happen? Unless you have a multitude of shooters. If you've got a multitude of shooters, then you've got a separate event from what they
yeah.
initially told you. Again, the anomaly of the window doesn't appear to be shot out. It appears to be taken out. I mean, alarm bells right there. Alarms would have gone off everywhere in the hotel. And then you also have the anomaly inside the hotel of the individual who's quote unquote shot in the hallway that later on goes on Ellen and is just like, I want it to all go away. I don't want anybody to
Right. So
talk.
that, yeah, that guy,
Hold
Jesus
that thought.
Campos.
That's where we're gonna start next, and then we're gonna get into a slew of other things. VegasTruth.org is the website. It is making sense of the madness, and we will be back with more after this. Hey everybody, Jason Bermas here. Let you know that Making Sense of the Madness is changing for a bit. Soon enough, we're going to be moving to a more commentary-driven show, which airs live on my socials. Now, we hope to get some minor sponsors at $1,000 a piece each month and move it back in the direction of what you just saw with those great interviews with people who have done deep research. Now, until then, I really do need your support individually as well. Consider donating via the links down below, especially the Buy Me a Coffee, $5, $10, $15. It does mean the world to me, and it keeps this broadcast moving. Thank you so much, Bermas Brigade, for your continued support. And we are back. So we were kind of talking about body cam footage, other shooters. Let's talk about this major eyewitness, right? This individual that works at the hotel that allegedly gets shot. You also see the
Right.
body
So
cam footage before, after. A lot of it doesn't end up aligning with his story. Then he rolls out onto Ellen in a cane and he's like, no more media. And then I think he left the country for a while, right? Like he literally scooped up and left the country. Tell us about that individual.
So that guy, Jesus Campos, claims that he was shot at through the door and that his leg was injured by one of those rounds, and he's got this like little scrape on his leg. It's really strange, but he's on LBMPD body cam footage, basically being still in that same hallway down where the elevators are, where they converge, just kind of milling about, not like there's a guy with a automatic weapons down the hall that just shot at him. They're just kind of hanging out. They're waiting for somebody to go breach the room. I mean, it's so bizarre. My conjecture is that that individual is probably the person who broke the windows out or had them, blasted with the tannerite or whatever mechanism was used. That room was staged. They had the sniper nest all built out. That was the cover story. They shot from other vectors, helicopters presumably because of the muzzle flash, but also ground teams probably. There was some sort of other stuff going on. There were shooting events happening well after 1016 further up the strip, and that once they had felt a sufficient number of people had died and they could get their objective, then it's time to disclose the room. And Campos was the inside person to do that. That's what I think happened. He probably cut his leg breaking the glass out, and then he had to explain how he was up there in the hall with this cut. I mean, this is kind of what I've put together, Jason. This is my best assessment of it at the
And by the
time.
way, I want to, you're putting it out there as speculation.
It
And you're not
is,
saying
yeah.
it's definite. Now, when we talk about that hallway, again, the official narrative is there's this shootout in the hallway. Did that happen or not? Is there a shootout in the hallway from the room? Because that seems to have
We have
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we have no 911 calls from hotel guests saying that there's gunfire even coming from the Mandalay Bay. I mean, just think about the audio signature of firing, an AR-15, which I'm sure most of us have. Um, there's no way, like you would have so many calls if I hear. And the other thing out here in the West is you have a lot of private party individuals with concealed carry, et cetera. And there's a lot of sheepdogs that, if we heard fire like that, we may actually try to intervene. I mean, that's what happened in Dallas when, those two guys tried to shoot up the art festival. They were put down immediately. And I think that, whoever put this plan together, kind of realized that might be the case, and for that reason, their shooters were far removed from, where anybody else could say, "Hey, there's a shooter," or "Hey, let's get that shooter." Um, so that's kind of my working theory. Um, what do you got to say about that?
Again, I always try to stick to what I can prove, right?
Yeah,
Because there's only so much publicly available evidence out there. Unfortunately, there seems to be much more evidence. For instance, when we look at Paddock, a lot of people were like, well, how did he get the guns in? They did release those videos. I mean, literally, he just went right down into his
yep.
truck.
They show. Yeah, sure. He brings the guns in, but let's stop there. Let's show what we can
Yeah,
prove. We can prove
let's talk about it.
we can prove the body's not Paddock, right? This decedent left in the room, it's provably not Paddock.
Mm-hmm.
Put that image in Grok, see what comes up. It's the ear doesn't match. That alone is enough, but we have so much more. We can prove that the Mandalay Bay should have had all of the camera footage of what actually went on in and around that room. So if that's not Paddock, we can say definitively that they should have known that Paddock left the building.
Mm-hmm.
While that may not mean that they were behind it, they were certainly complicit in a cover up. I mean, that's just kind of we can infer that, right? But it's not, my job or your job to implicate them. It's a prosecutor's job. That's what should be happening.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we can prove that those transponders turned off, in the helicopters. We can prove that there was a visual signal of some sort of flashing light that is not consistent with any kind of navigation light. The argument that people would be up there taking camp like pictures makes no sense. Like, you wouldn't use flash photography in open airspace, right? I mean, you wouldn't put yourself in a helicopter and disclose that you might have had some sort of foreknowledge. Just none of that makes sense. So why were those visual signals going? We can prove that the FAA restricted the release of that radar information, later citing that it was because of FBI equities. We can prove that the FBI was notified about all of these things, and I can prove that so many more people were notified, as far as lawyers involved with the cases, the FBI, the DOJ, the FAA, the DNI. So many people were made aware of these irreconcilable anomalies, and yet nothing was done. But trying to sort out, what exactly happened, to a degree, you need some subpoena power to be able to get in there, or warrants to be able to get from private entities like the Mandalay Bay, the security tapes. Um, so it's tough for citizens to unravel exactly what happened, but we know that the narrative doesn't work. Paddock, was he maybe a pilot, maybe a former CIA pilot or a drug runner, or an arms dealer? All of that stuff is plausible, and possible and likely, but does that mean that he did what happened? He was involved in it in some manner, sure, because he was there. So clearly, in some way, he was connected to this event. But we can prove that he was not the shooter that fired from that room. I believe we can prove that no shots were actually fired from that room, save for perhaps, I don't even know if the 308 that hit the tank early on is provably from that room. I mean, all we have are two windows broken out, right? And we've got those witnesses down at the bus stop at 10:16 saying that glass is falling from the Mandalay Bay then at that time. And that's concurrent with the last two shots recorded from the Mandalay Bay, which are singular shots or explosions. I don't know if it's a tannerite detonation or what it is, but there's two signatures. And that's right, that's about an hour before the breach, but those are the last sounds coming out of that room.
Mm-hmm.
So the other thing that I'd like to talk with you just briefly is that after all this stuff came out, like, Shepard and I
Before we
talked.
get there, just for the
Yeah,
room anomalies, one of the things that really struck me is if you've got a guy sitting up there firing, you should have shell casings everywhere. And those
yeah,
shell casings would have been hot, and they would have
yeah.
been at least embedded in the rug or the surrounding furniture or wherever they landed. And those are not evident in any of the videos. You would have think they would have been noted. There would have been a smell. Again, you don't just fire weapons in a vacuum, everybody. You know what I mean? So that was always an anomaly to me that didn't make sense. So, what are your thoughts on that before you go a little further?
There's the other weird thing too is like if you're shooting up there and your goal is to kill as many people as possible and you have all those guns, why are you taking 3-minute breaks between shots? Like you would fire one mag and then go grab another and then fire that and then another and another and another. And if your gun got too hot, you would grab another and another and another. And that's not what happened. When you look at the volley of these sound signatures of shots, there's like huge gaps between each one. None of that makes sense. And then this person that was found dead, it's so like clearly staged. Like there's a rifle laying on top of his leg, but he supposedly shot himself with a handgun. It's like, how could he fall and then have that rifle land on top of his leg? It's all so bizarre. Like they did not stage it well. Is
So again, again, the implication here is obviously number one, you don't believe it's Paddock, but number
correct.
two, obviously not suicide. So you have a staged
Correct.
murder.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, which is another victim then. That individual clearly didn't sign up for whatever happened to him,
Well, let's say
And
even
when
if
you
it
look at
is
his
Paddock,
autopsy, he had
it,
bruises on the backs of his legs.
mhm.
It looks like he might have been tortured or beaten before he was killed.
So all right, let's talk. So even if it is Paddock, it's a murder. For me in my research, I think he went up there for some kind of an arms deal. You know what I mean? If it is him, maybe that's how he's involved, and he gets out, and they got the other person in there. I think that's why you have all the weapons there. That's what makes the most sense. Again, you have that video of the individual bringing them in, so that's probably how they got in there. Other than that, you are looking at the window damage and one death. That's for sure. But everything else surrounding it, to me at least, is in question just based on the physical evidence and the eyewitness accounts and the body cam footage of that area that we have that spans, I would say, it's about 2 hours, right? Like 2 hours start to finish of body cam footage, et cetera, right? Correct?
Yeah, or more, or more.
Yeah.
I think we disagree, Jason,
Mhm.
on this point, and of course, everybody's entitled to their own interpretation of the
Sure.
evidence. But I he may have been an arms dealer. I don't think this was an arms deal gone wrong. I think that in fact is kind of like a cover story for what actually happened.
Okay.
I think that the 4chan reveal about OSI and the scanner technology is in fact the reason that this whole thing happened. I think that Paddock was put in play to execute that event, and that it would have gone off flawlessly if somebody had not been aware of Chertoff and Ailson's plans and released that to 4chan. Because the very next day, on October 2nd, Chad Sweet from Chertoff Group is on national media disclosing that the solution to this kind of problem is more body scanner tech. And then it was a day or so later that the forward picked up on the 4chan reveal. And as soon as it started percolating into various media things, the whole story just flooded out of the internet. And I think at that time is when we started hearing, well, maybe it was an arms deal. And the other weird thing is when you started, chewing on the helicopter information and the radar stuff, we got introduced to this Saudi prince story,
Hold on
which
1 second. That's where I wanted to go next because
perfect.
as soon as I heard that, I was extremely skeptical. And then later on, when you learn the source of it, and we'll get into that after the break, I became more skeptical. So I want to get your take on it. We're going to take a break. VegasTruth.org. VegasTruth.org is the website. It is making sense of the madness. We'll be back after this. Hey, Hey everybody, Jason Bermas here. Let you know that making sense of the madness is changing for a bit. Soon enough, we're going to be moving to a more commentary-driven show, which airs live on my socials. Now, we hope to get some minor sponsors at $1,000 a piece each month and move it back in the direction of what you just saw with those great interviews with people who have done deep research. Now, until then, I really do need your support individually as well. Consider donating via the links down below, especially the Buy Me a Coffee, $5, $10, $15. It does mean the world to me, and it keeps this broadcast moving. Thank you so much, Bermas Brigade, for your continued support. And we are back. So let's talk Saudi Arabia, Vegas, Saudi princes, and all these other things. So, when I first dug into that, and I'm going to be really specific about this because I think it's important. First of all, originally it seems to come, and I love Alex, and I still do the fourth hour of the Alex Jones Show, but it is an individual named James Brower on his show who's a complete shit poster. And more than likely involved in the origin story of the QAnon nonsense that everybody's in love with. For those that don't know, he's Dreamcatcher. He's involved with other nefarious internet individuals such as DeFango and such as Schoenberg. I could go on and on. The list goes on and on and on of bad people. I actually interviewed DeFango and Brower under his pseudonym Dreamcatcher in January of 2018, and whether they're telling the exact truth of the QAnon origin stories, some of it is there. You know what I mean? So you've got basically people that love to lie about things putting this story out there. And immediately, even before I knew I knew nothing about the QAnon. In fact, this all happens before the QAnon nonsense. And really, for those that don't understand, that's another reason I'm very skeptical of 4chan, 8chan internet posts, because a lot of this stuff comes out of the Cicada group, and again, these shit posters that also poisoned the well with Pizzagate. A lot of that was real, and then you had people that were like putting out fake menus and all sorts of Johnny nonsense to poison that well. This felt like that. What is your take on the Saudi part of the story?
That's Saudis, right? America and Israel scapegoat for all of the deep ops. Um, you know, quick bullet point. The 4chan post is uniquely interesting because of its timestamp. So it came out September 11th, 2017. So it preceded the event. And that's why I always held that it was important to pay attention to, regardless of who actually posted it. It was prescient. Okay, Saudis. Made no sense to me right off the bat. Made no sense. I mean, it was like, okay, this is clearly some sort of cover for whatever was going on with these helicopters. If you were trying to extract a prince, why would you go through all of the, just the shenanigans of like this massive gunfire and all? It's just, it was so you would be drawing all of Vegas's law enforcement response to that hotel. Like, why would you do that? You wouldn't. And one of the things that they were using as a bit of information or data to support their narrative was this. They called it a plane or a helicopter that landed on the Mandalay Bay roof and conducted this exfiltration. Well, I had known from my review of the radar data on Flight Radar 24 and also listening to the ATC audio that that was in fact a commercial jet flying out of the Midwest, Southwest. I think it was 4911. Forgive me if or maybe it was 9411. I can't remember the tail number exactly at the moment, but we were able to track it all the way from, I believe, like Oklahoma, heading towards Vegas, landing on the runway, communicating with air traffic control the entire time. And in that moment when it seems to like make this little turn and stop on top of the Mandalay, if you listen to air traffic control audio, it's already landed and they are telling it to make a right turn onto the runway. So it was just a rendering error on Flight Radar 24. But these guys, right, saw that and used it, man, and they used it. And then this whole concocted story. And so it really seemed to me kind of like an intelligence operation to basically distract or distort what had actually happened and to come up with some culprits that could be used. And this channel materialized, and it was a channel that was early on. There's a researcher, I don't know, John Cullen or Hoover or what have you, and I don't know anything about this guy or what his motives are, but he really embraced this Saudi story and started pushing with heavy production, like high production quality, these videos with this particular version of events.
And by the way,
Um,
conflating some of the thing like the Tropicana footage, right? Like we should be looking into the fact that there were probable gunmen at least on the ground somewhere from the trajectory of the bullets. Like for instance, again,
yeah,
the reports which you can listen to on audio of shootings in and around the Tropicana. The physical evidence of the Bellagio. Again, it doesn't make sense. It came from the top of the Mandalay Bay. If you've ever been in Vegas and on the Strip, it's just not. That would be
right.
magic, folks.
It doesn't line up.
It
Yeah,
does. It would
doesn't
be
line up.
magic. So, again, we have massive surveillance in all of Vegas, not just inside and directly outside of the hotels. We're talking streets littered. Everybody should know who made the shots into the Bellagio, when and what. There's no doubt about it. You should be able to follow that person to wherever they went, and yet we don't have those things. I mean, that's step one in a real investigation. And now they're all of a sudden is this magical golden boogeyman trail of Saudi princes, which
Right.
which
It's so fanciful. It doesn't make sense. And, the Saudi princes, there's generally like, pretty significant disclosure when they come to the United States. I mean, there's news coverage, but a few weeks later, I believe they actually did go to Vegas and the world knew about it. I mean,
they're
it
there
was
all
there.
the time, bro. I'm a huge fight fan. I'll be calling
Okay.
fights over at Caged Aggression next week,
Yeah.
Thursday through Saturday. Everybody check it out at
Okay.
cagedaggression.tv. But for instance, Dana White literally just signed the deal with the Saudi prince to now start promoting boxing. They're in the
There you
fight
go.
world. They're in Vegas
All the time.
constantly.
Okay, so they're right. It's not so, and so if somebody were going to make a move against them, would you add all this other stuff? It just doesn't make sense. It never made sense to me. To each their own. But
Why
I
would you
felt that that was a cover
potentially
story.
butcher hundreds of people? Thank God we didn't get into that mark, but potentially
Yeah.
to
Oh, it could
not,
have been thousands. There were 20,000 people in attendance.
yeah.
I mean, I feel that they largely shot from too far away, and that is why 450 people were hit by bullets but not killed. And it could have been much worse.
Yes.
It could have been
It
really,
could
really
have
bad.
been much worse. But again, why do that to not kidnap and kill your target?
Totally. Right. Yeah.
Again, none of it made. Every time I heard that story, I was just like, I don't know these direct lines. I'm not seeing them. I'm a
Yeah.
big guy on the physical evidence. Again, that's why loose change is so
Yeah.
heavy on the physical evidence. And then, I
Yeah.
took a step back with Fabled Enemies and went more heavy on the international intelligence operation. But I utilized, again, the firsthand documentation, video evidence, eyewitness accounts, etc. That's what you need to do and not play into fantasistville. Continue.
Yeah. Agree. I mean, so it felt fanciful. There were some key features that were being avoided or not discussed in the Saudi narrative, and that all struck me as suspicious. It's like, why not look at all the evidence and integrate it? It's like Feynman said, you have to look at all the experimental data, all of the evidence available to us, and then you have to kind of put it all together, and it all has to make sense. And if you have these outliers or things that don't fit, then your theory or your interpretation is likely not correct. And that was my assessment of the Saudi narrative. So I don't think that that was the motive or the reason or really had anything to do with what happened. There was some footage of a I think it was like a security person leaving a hotel, and people were saying that that was a Saudi prince. I mean, it was just when you really dove into it, there was none of that going on. And to your point, they're there all the time. I mean, if you really wanted to do something to somebody, you could have one person do that, and you could have them do it in an afternoon. If that's what somebody wanted to do. So it didn't make sense. It still doesn't to me. I tried, Jason, to get this information to so many different people that I thought might have been able to do something with it. And some of those people were like the OIGs of various agencies. And we're in this unique moment in time where we now have such a transition in our power structure, such a change. So we have Gabbard, uh, uh, you know, as DNI, who I believe is a good person. I do believe that. I believe that she has an ethos about her that is truly remarkable. I mean,
Listen, I'm
it
in
is,
large agreement with you on that. I know there's a lot of
man.
doomers out there, and look, I'll take this administration to task on anything. I hate what they're doing in the Middle East right now, right? But as
Yeah.
far
Oh,
as
yeah,
Tulsi
100%.
Gabbard
But
as an individual, the Jackman brothers, who I've known since they were literally in high school, student scholars for 9/11 Truth, they worked on her campaign. They were
yeah,
close with her and her husband. Generally, they're pretty good judgments of character. You know,
yep,
they said to me, for instance, I often bring up the Pakistani angle of 9/11 and General Mahmoud Ahmed. And, they had
uh-huh,
that talk with the husband, her, and they're just like, look, they don't know. There are blind spots. These people are just, they don't know the things that we know sometimes because they're not looking at it and they're so absorbed. So we can't judge
yeah.
from the
No, not judging.
yeah.
I'm hopeful. I have hope that
No,
we
I mean, I'm
might
just saying for
continue to
those that
put the
are
evidence.
always on the doomer end of it, we can't judge them based on ignorance, right?
Right,
We can only
right,
judge them based on the mobility once they have all the information available, right? And we should.
correct.
And I think that's the obstacle we have with people like Gabbard, because people like RFK Jr., they're in that position because they were ignorant at one time. Finally, that information was forced upon them. They had to accept it, and then they moved in that proper direction. And to me, that's really where we have to be at as researchers, activists, and individuals that are seeking truth.
I think that Kash Patel is going to be a very important player in this. He has talked about radical transparency at the FBI, and everything that we have discussed to this moment is stuff that the FBI does know about, should know about. The Inspections Division does know about, and so if you have a different director from on high coming in and saying, "Hey, we're gonna relook at all of this, and we're going to do the right thing by the American people," and those families that whose loved ones were mass murdered on that day, Cash has the power to do that. And so, VegasTruth.org website has reporting links where you can reach out to various congressional committees, to make disclosures. I'll share with you. I mean, I've made these requests and you cannot get a reply. Nobody in our federal government wants to touch this. And so it is imperative upon all of us to continue to make those requests, to make those asks, to show them the evidence, to show them the discrepancies that don't align with the mythology that we've been given. And I certainly hope that by doing that, that maybe one of these good actors could come in there and make a real change. I don't know. I mean, I continue to be an optimist, Jason, regardless of how crazy, things. I mean, I swallowed the hope, in 2008. All the, right. I mean, I just,
This is what I say to people, man. First of all, no one's coming to save your ass. Okay? Every day I wake up, I look in the mirror, I can look at myself, and I know that I got to be my own hero. Ignorance is
yeah,
also not bliss. You want as much information as possible so you can navigate situations. That doesn't mean it's going to be great all the time, but I utilize the COVID 1984 nightmare as a great example. Some of us early on knew things were about to get bad and we were going to have to decide whether we were going to work, where our kids were going to school, whether we were staying in our home state. I moved from New York all the way to Iowa after checking out the country, knowing that things were changing for at least a significant, and who knows if they were ever going back, right? I don't have a crystal ball. Lies don't make friends, and they certainly don't make an informed citizenry. So we also need
right.
as much transparency as possible. That doesn't mean the sun ain't shining outside right now, and I'm not taking my dog for a walk later on with smiles on my face.
Yeah.
You've got to look at the macro in your life, and then you've got to look at what you can change on the outside. And I would say taking as much information so you're doing the best you can with what you got. Just kind of like we were talking about with Gabbard before. We got to take one last break. VegasTruth.org is the website. You can check out all the documentation on the left-hand side. We've got PDFs, videos, and, of course, a picture gallery. Go check it out right now. Final segment of Making Sense of the Madness after this. Hey everybody, Jason Bermas here. Let you know that making sense of the madness is changing for a bit. Soon enough, we're going to be moving to a more commentary-driven show, which airs live on my socials. Now, we hope to get some minor sponsors at $1,000 a piece each month and move it back in the direction of what you just saw with those great interviews with people who have done deep research. Now, until then, I really do need your support individually as well. Consider donating via the links down below, especially the Buy Me a Coffee, $5, $10, $15. It does mean the world to me, and it keeps this broadcast moving. Thank you so much, Bermas Brigade, for your continued support. And we are back with Xander Arena. So Xander, you brought up Kash Patel. You brought up FBI transparency. A lot of hubbub about the Epstein files. Now, again, I have been doing this a long time, as you know, and following that case, since I was the first person to get a job over at InfoWars. 2008, we were talking about that.
Uh-huh.
The massive ignorance of people surrounding the release of documentation of and what's already out there. There is no client list. He wasn't selling girls. He was molesting a multitude of them, but then pawning them off in networks of blackmail and currying favor with people, etc. Some of them were in the network. They've been named in the documents. Leslie Groff, Nadia Marcinkova, Holly Robinson, Sarah Kellen, all in there. All in there. If anything gets released that's new, and it is criminal in nature, and you bet your ass it's criminal in nature. They've got all that video. They've got those binders they've got it. You would have to have criminal indictments and prosecutions of those individuals before you could even release those documents. The same would probably be the case here if they were really going to do it. Once again, the Bellagio doesn't get shot up in a vacuum. The Tropicana doesn't get shot up in a vacuum. Right? There have to be individuals, and then there have to be cases, unless they make it about an open case and they truly are ignorant of who these people are. In other words, somehow, some way, magically they beat the system. They're covered head to toe. You can't, get any kind of facial recognition. It would be very rare. But the truth of the matter is, if they were being honest, there would be an announcement of a case, some arrests, and then the release of that documentation. What's your feeling on that? Because that goes for a lot of these events. It's not just Vegas. It's not just Epstein. Go down the line, my man. And, you alluded to 9/11. That's the gravy train with biscuit wheels we're all waiting for. So what are your thoughts?
I mean, Vegas was kind of a side project for me. 9/11 truth is really my core fundamental mission and goal. It's so important. It changed the entire planet. It changed our country irrevocably. But perhaps not. Perhaps we can go back to a little bit of before. But no. Do they know what happened? I think that they do. Will they make those arrests? I don't know. I'm hesitant to. What's going on in the Middle East right now, and some of the supporters in the 47th administration give me some concern that anything is going to come of this. But here I am, just saying it, talking about it. I'm hopeful. Maybe. They likely know who those pilots were. Whether they would know the identification of all the ground teams, I don't know. But I do know that NORAD was alerted. I do know that Nellis was alerted. I do know that the DNI and the DHS and a whole ton of other collateral agencies were notified. I would hope that maybe within those agencies that somebody paid attention, that somebody might have tried to garner some extra information, and maybe that's available. Maybe there will be some arrests. I just don't know. But I do know that we are applying pressure effectively to DC, our citizenry on the left and right. And there are huge changes happening. And I think we all need to continue doing that because, this kind of stuff has got to stop, right? Like they got to stop doing this kind of stuff. The controlled demolitions in New York will be borne out. And kudos to you for being an early advocate of that. But that is there's no going back. That is discovered. Most of the AI algorithms nowadays will talk about that. We know that because of attenuation of forces, that the top fraction of that North Tower could not have destroyed the lower fraction. I mean, this is all going to be. You will have your day, Jason. Like, told ya.
Listen,
I
I'm
mean,
not
yeah.
here to be the "I told you so" guy.
I understand, and nor am I. But we're going to get that relief of being like, maybe I'm just going to mountain bike today. You know, I don't have to. I don't have to
Listen, I
worry about
understand
anything
your
else.
frustration probably more than most as an early. No, I mean, people don't understand that even before loose change and the massive. It's funny because I help raise my nieces, right, and they're teenage girls. They're 14 and 16, and we do travel volleyball, and this will make sense in a minute, everybody. And we got done with the tournament the other day, and she's got a friend. My niece, luckily, she's the best person on the team, right? She doesn't sub out. She's extremely emotional for sure, all those things. But because of that, there's some jealousy with the other parents because sometimes their kids don't play or they're subbed out all the time, etc. So a couple of the parents talk crap about her. And she looks at me, and it's her friend's parents, and she's like, Uncle Jason, she's about to cry. She's like, I go, listen, kid, when you're good at things or you're right about things, you're going to get attacked. I go, your uncle has been attacked in national media, in newspapers, and on television. She's like, that's okay, you're old. And I'm like, kid, I wasn't that old when it first started happening. I was in my 20s.
Yeah.
And I go, that's going to happen for you before you know it. It feels better. Wait, listen, you're never going to make everybody happy. And the thing is that after we pierced that mark, the attacks were even more vicious. But I lost a lot of friends and family that didn't want to talk to me. The irony is, after the media started attacking me and they actually had to look at my information they're the ones that were some of the first adopters of apologies and coming around. And by this time, I still have the people that mock me and make fun of me. They're the ones on Booster 7. Okay, so I ain't got no tears. The bottom line is most people have realized we were lied to about that event. Most people are on board with looking into these things, and really that's why we have Trump 2.0 and all these other things. MAGA ain't perfect. These people ain't perfect. Patel walked off this very show right after I brought up signature reduction. Are you aware of signature reduction, by the way?
No, tell me.
So
You got a
we'll
minute?
bring it up just really quick as the crescendo. If you watch this show, you know all about it. But essentially, about 3 years ago, William Arkin went into the military secret undercover army. I'll just read you the first paragraph. Largest undercover force the world has ever known is the one that was created by the Pentagon over the past decade, so now about 15 years. Some 60,000 people now belong to this secret army, many working under masked identities and in low profile, all part of a broad program called signature reduction. The force, more than 10 times the size of the clandestine elements of the CIA, carries out domestic and foreign assignments, both in military uniform and under civilian cover. In real life and online, yes, they're the Russian bots, sometimes hiding in private businesses and consultancies, some of them household name companies. So in other words, they're already embedded in Google, in X, in every military industrial complex company, and they're running ops here. Oh, and they have access to all the databases, can create individuals, alter them. Oh, and they actually also have disguises. This one's a good one. You think you're looking at a hand. You're actually looking at a DARPA-developed hand sleeve that has anybody's biometric information on it and can emit human oils. Never been talked about in Congress. No oversight whatsoever. Brought that program up. Kash Patel thought it was a little too QAnon nonsense for him and walked off. Kash, let's disclose this program and many others. Xander, I ended it on a rant. Let everybody know how they can support your work, and what would you like to leave the audience with?
Visit the website and please watch the full interview where I go through step by step all of the data that was done on Redacted. That would be a good one. Also, Jeremy Sladen's show. I did a nice interview there, and you can get the information for yourself. And then use those reporting links. Reach out to various agencies and make disclosures. And if you're in law enforcement, or federal law enforcement, and you have a vested interest in doing the right thing by the American people, like put your name in the ring too. Because we all need to be a part of the solution.
Thank
That's
you,
it.
sir. I appreciate you, and I appreciate you guys watching this show right here on Patriot.tv 5 days a week, where the truth lives. Remember, to me, it is not about left or right. It is always about right and wrong. I will see you guys on the flip side. Hey everybody, Jason Bermas here. Let you know that making sense of the madness is changing for a bit. Soon enough, we're going to be moving to a more commentary-driven show, which airs live on my socials. Now, we hope to get some minor sponsors at $1,000 a piece each month and move it back in the direction of what you just saw with those great interviews with people who have done deep research. Now, until then, I really do need your support individually as well. Consider donating via the links down below, especially the Buy Me a Coffee, $5, $10, $15. It does mean the world to me, and it keeps this broadcast moving. Thank you so much, Bermas Brigade, for your continued support.